This is an Apostrophe podcast production.
Beatlology.
Before we talk about your wonderful book, which I really enjoyed, let's talk a little bit about you. Let's begin at the beginning. So where were you born and where did you grow up?
Same place, Meriden, Connecticut. Born there, grew up there. Right up until I went to college, I was in Meriden, Connecticut.
Ah. Were your parents musical?
No, they weren't. They enjoyed singing along to the radio, but neither one of them played an instrument. The family legend was that we had a great grandfather that played the piano at a silent movie house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I actually have a booklet of all these songs that I don't know whether he wrote them or just, were someone else's songs that he played for the movies, but I have that here tucked away.
Wow. Imagine those times playing live to movie theaters. What a time in our history. So if your parents didn't play, so what were some of your early musical influences?
My older siblings. I actually remember with my sister down in the basement playing along to, who was the guy that was a one and a two? And
Lawrence Welk.
Lawrence Welk. The Lawrence Welk band would play, and my sister and I would jump on the couch and pretend to play the instruments. So I knew that, that even all the way back then, music moved me. And then I had an older brother that got into the folk scene and had an acoustic guitar leaning against the wall. And he was into Peter, Paul and Mary, people like that, Buffy St. Marie, things like that. And then, my sister was 3 years older than me. So she got into the Beatles quicker than I did. And so most of that music came from listening outside her door and then stealing the records after she went to college.
I can't tell you how many people we've interviewed, Gary, where an older sister has been the gateway to the Beatles. It's an extraordinary, everybody has that story almost.
Yeah, we all had the records with, the scrawled things that the sister wrote on the records. I love Paul, I love George, all that stuff. Yeah, I had all that.
When did you pick up a guitar?
I was in the summer of my senior year of high school. I had just gone to Woodstock.
You were there?
Yeah. And I came back from Woodstock and I was on my high school soccer team. And during the last game before the first semester of my senior year started, I got my leg broken. And I was in a body cast from, as I like to say, from nipple to toe. I was in a body cast, flat on my back. So my parents set up a stereo that I could reach from leaning over outside the bed. And I grabbed my brother's guitar because he was in college and the Mel Bay Big Note songbook. And I taught myself how to play the guitar.
While you were convalescing?
Yeah, while I was flat on my back. I didn't need a guitar strap.
So a few years after that, Gary, let's jump to 1974. You're working in an auto parts store. How did you make the jump from auto parts to a music career?
Well, once I got decent on the guitar, the guy that I went to Woodstock with was a drummer. And he knew some other musicians. So we started what was, for me, my first band. And like every kid that age, I went from band to band to band. When I was working at the auto parts store, I had just come back from being in California for 2 years with a band trying to make it big in California. it was the first band I was ever in that did original material.
Hmm.
And that's what made me start writing to compete with the other guy in the band who wrote the songs. And I wanted to, be represented. So I started writing as well as him. And we were supposed to go to LA and rule the troubadour. But we made a quick 2-week stop at Santa Cruz in Northern California that turned into a 2-year stop. And we never did make it down to LA until finally I just got, everybody in the band kind of stopped caring, or at least they shifted their allegiance from music to drugs.
Right.
And I got an offer from a guy in back in my hometown. If you come back, I got a band waiting for you. So I packed up and I came back when I started work at I worked at the auto parts store because I didn't want to work in the family business.
Which was?
My dad was an electrical contractor. He had Burr Electric. And my brother had just gotten out of the Navy, and he started a alarm security division of Burr Electric. And they wanted me to come back. The door was always open for me to come back and work either for my dad or my brother. But I had a feeling that if I did that, I would never get out of it. I would be in the family business, and they would just assume that I was going to be next in line for the, to pass down the business. So I tried getting any other job I could to keep from doing that. And that's why I was working in the auto parts and playing in a band and writing songs at night.
So that's early 70s. That's 74, 75, 76. Is that what we're talking?
Yep.
So how did you become the lead singer of Pure Prairie League? Was that 1980?
Yes.
How did that happen?
I was writing songs for the band I was in. And at one point, one of the guys in the band said to me, you got 2 of these songs that could be on the radio. You should try to get a record deal. So I borrowed some money from my brother and went into a studio and recorded the 2 songs. Then I went to our local record store and I wrote down all the addresses of 11 different record companies and made a reel-to-reel tape and sent 11 reel-to-reel tapes to 11 different A&R departments. Just A&R department, Sony Records, A&R department, Capitol Records. And I got 10 rejection letters and 1 note from a guy at CBS saying, there's something here, give me a call. And he became my mentor and my pathway into the real music business. Every time I'd write a song, I would send it to him, and he would tell me if I'm on the right path, on the wrong path. And I actually wrote a bunch of songs that he liked, and he got me a record deal at Life Song Records, Tommy West and Terry Cashman.
From Terry Cashman from the, what band
Baseball
was he?
song.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And Tommy West ended up running MTM Records for Mary Tyler Moore, for her company. So I got a deal with them. And they had a band called Crack the Sky and Henry Gross. And I think they had
Shannon.
Jim Croce's catalog. And I made a record with my mentor producing under an assumed name because he was producing for another label where we worked for CBS. So I think he called himself, I can't even remember, something ridiculous, Frank Palomino or something like that. And so we did the record, and like a month after the record came out, this was in 78. About a month after the record came out, the record label shut down, which also happens a lot. So my mentor's name was Harold Kleiner. And so we both said, well, I'll keep writing. You keep looking for a record deal. And in the meantime, if I write something that you think we can get recorded by somebody, do your damnedest.
What genre are you writing at that point?
Country rock, very Eagles, Birds kind of stuff. So that first record was called Matters of the Heart, and it's not very good, but in every song, I think you hear a little something that obviously gave Harold hope. So during the 78 to 81, I'm writing songs in the basement, trying to get a new record deal. And somewhere along the line, Harold called me up and said, my friend is producing Pure Prairie League. Do you know them? I said, oh my God, I love Pure Prairie League. They were one of the records that I learned guitar to. Funny thing is, I learned guitar to a Pure Prairie League album, Tapestry, and a Beatles album. And I ended up working with all three of those acts.
Wow.
So he said, well, they need a new lead singer because Vince Gill just left. Are you interested? And I said, absolutely. I'd never toured before. So I went to Cincinnati and I auditioned and I got the gig. And I played with Pure Prairie League for 4 or 5 years. And while I was doing that, one night at home, I wrote a song that got me on the charts and made me a professional songwriter.
What song was that?
Juice Newton, Love's Been a Little Bit Hard on Me in 1982.
That's a big song. That's a big song.
That was a big song. It was life-changing.
Going back one beat, the song Amy that I know predated you in the band, doesn't that have a Canadian connection? Because we're all Canadians here. Does that not have a Canadian connection, that song?
I think Craig wrote it when he was in Canada avoiding the draft. He always says that the original Amy in the song was a French-Canadian prostitute. That's all I can, whether that's a joke or not, but those are the only Canadian connections that I have ever heard of over the years.
Okay. Even the spelling of Amy looks like it's French to me. So that probably is some truth in that. I was watching a video of you. You were talking about your songwriting philosophy, Gary, about looking in different windows. Tell us about that, because I thought that was very interesting.
That's an idea that I actually heard from Don Schlitz, the guy that wrote The Gambler. When you have that first idea for a song, a first title, the first idea you have is pretty much just off the top of your head. So it probably is the same idea that 100 different songwriters would immediately go for, which means there's 100 other songs that are that. But we like to say if you picture a round building with windows all around it, you put the idea in the middle of it. Let's say you look through the window and you see a man and a woman hugging each other. And you go, oh, I'm going to write a love song. Then you walk a couple of windows around, and now the perspective is you can see behind the woman, and she's got a big knife in her hand behind her back. And you're going, oh, it's one of those murder songs, like Long Black Veil. But you keep walking around, and now the view shifts, and you can see that they're standing next to a table with a turkey on it. Oh, it's a holiday song. It's a Thanksgiving song. That's fun. As long as we can find a good rhyme for cranberry, we're good. And then you keep walking around, and but that's the point of it. If you don't accept the first one, don't even accept the second one. Keep going. What could that's my favorite part of the process, is sitting with somebody going, what does that mean? What could that mean? Well, it means blah blah blah. Okay, but what else could it mean? What what if it is? Oh, what if the guy isn't the boyfriend but the father? That would change it. Oh, and what if the daughter isn't? And you keep doing that until you've you know started a new path for the song instead of the same path that 1,000 other writers would have taken.
Very
So
interesting.
yeah, that's what that philosophy is. It's just the idea of if I write a love song, there's 100,000 new love songs just this month in Nashville, and some of them written by some really powerful people that owe publishing companies a lot of money. So they're the ones that are going to get way above mine. But if I write a love song from an angle that's never been done before, nothing's better than having somebody say, I never heard it this way, or I never heard a song about that before. And, that's what you need to cut through the noise.
Speaking of Nashville, how did you land in Nashville?
Well, my first cut was the Juice Newton song, and that was Harold sent that down to someone he knew in Nashville, a guy named Bob Montgomery, who ran House of Gold Music, Bobby Goldsborough's publishing company. And I'm sure he sent it to 100 other people, but Bob Montgomery said, this is a hit. Called me up saying, hey, somebody's cutting your song, but I never knew who. And then I get the phone call that it's not only, cut, but it's going to be the first single off of her new album, which is a pretty prime spot. So we were really excited about it. But he was in Nashville, and obviously the next thing is, what else you got? So I had a song that I had written to try to pitch it to Barry Manilow, a big synthesizer string, sappy song. And they took that one and gave it to the Oak Ridge Boys. And I said, Oak Ridge Boys can't do this song. This isn't a country song. And they said, well, it is now. And that was my first #1 country song. Second song I ever had cut after Love's Been was #1 country Oak Ridge Boys.
Wow.
So Harold suggested, let's go down and start rubbing elbows so people start putting a face to the name. And we went down to Nashville, stayed with Bob Montgomery, went to a couple of big industry functions. I sat at some function next to Gene Autry, things like that, Chet Atkins, way back then. And I really liked it down there. And then there was this thing called co-writing. I'd never co-written before because I'm in Meriden, Connecticut. Who am I going to co-write with? So they set me up with my first co-write, and it's with Vince Gill.
Ah.
So I'm in a motel room at Shoney's with Vince trying to figure out what co-writing means. And I started to go down once every 2 or 3 months for a few days. And then it was once every 2 months for a week. Then it was once a month for a week. Then it was my wife at the time coming down with me to check out schools and look for houses in neighborhoods. And came back. And when the time came to pull the trigger, she said, I don't want to go. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stay here. You go. Let's get divorced. So I got divorced and was down in Nashville, and that was actually a plus career-wise because it really kept me focused. Because the country writing, my career was costing me my time with my kids. So I was going to make it worthwhile. So I was writing 3 times a day, 7 days a week. And I was able to start playing places like the Bluebird immediately on the good shows because I hit town with 2 or 3 hit records.
Right.
So I wasn't, I wasn't having to explain who I was to anybody. They had already heard of me. And I was considered this weird writer because all my songs were kind of Beatle-y and nobody else was doing that down here. So that really helped me that I was just kind of ripping off the Beatles for this song and that song and this song. And that's how I ended up in Nashville.
Wow. And the rest is history, and what a history it is. Speaking of the Beatles, how did they first get on your radar screen? Was it your sister?
It was my sister. It was the Ed Sullivan Show. But my biggest memory was my parents threw my sister and I in the back of the station wagon and drove us to a drive-in and backed into the slot so we could look out the back window and put on the speaker. And it was winter. And we were all closed up and we were looking. And it was Hard Day's Night.
Ah.
And that first chord hit, and I could hear 300 muffled girls screaming in the back of station wagons. And I never will forget that sound. And it made me go, this is something brand new. And that's my earliest. And then I remember riding in the car with my mom, and a song came on, and I had heard kids talking about it. I went, oh, this is that new band, the Beatles. And it wasn't their first song. It was the second song. So it was probably She Loves You.
She Loves You.
But those were the things that made me intrigued by them. And then what I did was I made myself my own buttons, to wear at school that say, I love the Dave Clark 5. Because every girl in my class would come running up and start yelling at me about how much the Beatles were better, and I'd get to talk to girls.
Ingenious.
It was pretty darn ingenious. Still didn't have a date till I was 37. But the point is, I wish I had saved those buttons. I learned something very valuable. But that's where I learned about the Beatles. And obviously, when I started playing in bands, 60% of the set list was Beatles songs.
First Beatle album or record you bought with your own money?
My sister had them all. She bought them all. Probably, first one I bought with my own money, I was standing on the sidewalk in front of our music store, the Music Box in Meriden, Connecticut, on Colony Street. And the truck pulls up and rolls up the back, and it's all the plastic wrap, brand new delivery. The album just got there. And about 5 of us were standing on the street, and the owner came out. We gave him money, and he cut the plastic, and we got like the first ones right off of the stack. They were still steaming from the oven. And I brought home Sgt. Pepper.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I remember very vivid stuff. I remember Hey Jude was out, and I wanted to get it, and I had just got my license. And I begged my parents, it was nighttime, to let me drive down to the store, down to the mall, and buy Hey Jude. They let me do it. I'm driving down. While I'm in there shopping, this fog rolls in. By the time I'm getting home, you can't see. And I'm terrified. I'm a brand new driver, but I got that Hey Jude sitting next to me, and I pull in the driveway, and I hit my dad's car with my mother's car. Smashed both of them, and had to walk in and say, those 2 cars you have? Well, they're kind of like one now. But I'm going upstairs and I'm going to go play Hey Jude because I figure I'm grounded for the next year, but I've got something to listen to.
Too funny. Too funny. Now, before we talk about your wonderful book, you have a long relationship with Ringo. How did that start?
Mark Hudson and I wrote for the same publishing company. So we were put together at various times and got to be really good friends. Really enjoyed each other's company, had a lot of laughs. When Ringo came out of recovery, he wanted to work. He needed somebody to write with and produce him. And he and Hudson had the same lawyer. So he told his lawyer, and his lawyer says, I got just the guy. So Hudson does the Vertical Man album with Ringo. And at some point in the process, calls me up. He actually called me up and left a message on my machine and said, I'm putting a band together. We're going to go to London. We're going to do a video. We're going to rehearse. We're going to come back to America and do VH1 Storytellers. And you're going to be gone for about 2.5 weeks. And I don't remember the amount, but he said, and it's going to be $3,000. So I called him back and I said, will Ringo take a check?
Yes, you're going to pay.
I'll pay $3,000 to do all that with Ringo. So I flew to London, and it was this great band with Jack Blades from Night Ranger on bass and Simon Kirke playing drums and Joe Walsh on guitar and Jim Cox on keyboards and, Hudson playing, me playing. And it was terrifying. First time I ever talked to him, I'm actually up on stage. I didn't even talk to him. And we're playing Octopus's Garden for the first time he'd ever done it since they recorded it. And we stop and Hudson goes, Gary, in the bridge, what are you singing? I said, well, the first 2 lines, I'm singing a third above. And then the last 2 lines of the bridge, I'm doubling Ring. And Ringo walks up to the mic and goes, I've known him for 2 minutes and I'm Ring. And I thought, oh, I'm so fired. I'm so going home. But Hudson took me aside and said, no. He only gives you shit if he likes you. And I said, man, I hope he doesn't like me too much because I'm going to have a fucking heart attack.
Wow. And that's where it all started. So were you on VH1 Storytellers, Ringo?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. That was a lot. That was really, really a lot of fun. And then, and so we played a bunch of things promoting that record. I honestly don't remember if I'm on anything in that record, but then he did the Santa Claus record and I'm all over that doing stuff. And then when it came time to write a new album, they invited me to come over to England, about an hour and a half outside of London. And Ringo had a big manor and a studio, and we, for 10 years or so, every couple of years, or every year and a half, we'd go over there and write and record a new album.
Wow.
Yeah, write a song in the morning, record it in the afternoon, overdubs at night, a couple of meals thrown in between. Next day, brand new song. Let's go.
Wow.
Tremendous. It was a tremendous experience.
How many albums have you done with Ringo now to date?
I think 9. I mean, when you say done, the last series of his EPs, I think I've had a song on each of the EPs, except when he did one that was all Linda Perry or all this or all that. But all the ones where, he wrote with a lot of different people like Joe or Ben Tench or something, I go out to LA and go to his house and we write a song and we go into the studio and I play the guitar and I sing a scratch vocal and he gets rid of the vocal and keeps the guitar. So I always get a credit for playing. And I've been doing that probably nine records.
Now Ringo has a new country album coming out in January, I believe. Have you done any work on that?
Yeah, I wrote something for it. But I don't know this, and he recorded it, but I don't know the status of it because after that was one of the first things he did for this project. And after we did that, T-Bone got involved and it kind of morphed into more of a T-Bone Americana country record. So I do not know the status of the song I did with him, but it came out. It was great.
Ah.
It is great. It'll see the light of day somewhere, maybe a bonus track or who knows. It really came out great.
Did your relationship with Ringo give you any insights for your book? For example, Gary, did Ringo, when you're having your conversations between gigs or between takes in the studio, did he ever talk about if the Beatles had ever considered a reunion? Did that ever come up somewhere in the conversation?
Yes, he once told us that in the late 70s, they were all talking about it, doing something. And the holdout at that point, surprisingly, was George. But Ringo thought that he'll probably come around. And then 1980 happened and that all went. But according to Ringo, in that one time, that one conversation about it, yeah, he did mention that.
Let's talk about your book. So you title it Reunion, a rock and roll fairy tale. Have you ever written a book before?
No. A few years ago, I was in a band with my wife, Georgia Middleman, and Kenny Loggins called Blue Sky Riders. We did 2 albums. And when we were on tour, everything these days is content. So every night after the show, I would write a blog about the show, about the trip, about the bus ride, and I tried to make it funny and the people that were following us loved them. And everybody, you should write a book. So at one point, I tried putting all those together to see if there was a book, and there wasn't. And then people said, well, you should write an autobiography because you've had an interesting life. And, guys like me, we live in the parentheses on the records. And that's not a great draw. Hey, you want to read a book about the guy in the parentheses that you never heard of? And if I do my job right, you don't hear about me. So that fell by the wayside. But when I was 5 years old, my grandmother bought me a typewriter. And I started writing my own fairy tales. And when I was in grade school, I used to walk to school. Sound like Abraham Lincoln. I used to walk to school with my buddies and read them my latest composition. So I always had that creative literary spark in me. But really what happened was the pandemic hit and everybody was writing songs over Zoom. And I tried it a few times and I didn't care for it. So I was looking around going, what do I do? And this idea had been percolating in my head for a while. And so that's when I, in earnest, thought, after a couple of different ideas of writing a book, this is the first one that actually sounded like it could go somewhere.
So you had that general idea for this book just before the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. I was in New York walking around. I always go to Strawberry Fields and I was looking and it's just the idea. I love the movies and things about, the what ifs, the sliding door, you miss the train and everything is different. And I was just, walking past the Dakota thinking, what would it have taken for them to have missed each other that night? And what if that was the only night he had the nerve to do it? And what if John had stayed in the studio for an extra couple of playbacks? Let me hear that again. And he gave up because he had to pee. It would have taken nothing, but everything would have been different. And then I started thinking, God, you could really create a whole new world. They would have done different albums. They would have this, they would have done that. Hell, they might have all gotten back together. And that's when I had the spark of what would be something that would have made them even talk about it. And that's why, you have to come up with 2 things. The reason why John and the killer miss each other and the reason why he picked up the phone after all those years.
Right.
And makes the entree.
I'm a nonfiction writer, and I'm always fascinated by fiction writers. Tell me something. Did you map out all the beats of the story, Gary, before you started writing, or did you just have a basic idea and start writing and let the story reveal itself to you?
Yes, the second. I did not, I mean, I knew about, writing the beats and things. Over the years, I've had people approach me to write a musical. So everything in the musical is the beats. This has to happen. You need a song that does this at this time of the night, blah, blah, blah. So I knew about the beats, but I also was amazed at how much the story wrote itself. I knew, and I really didn't know much. I just sort of, because I had been in so many bands that broke up and got back together and this and that, I just kind of imagined what the next thing would be. And while I was writing each chapter, any chance I had to throw in little Easter eggs and things, or some little things that I knew that nobody else knew, like that story about, George is getting gray. Yeah, he is. We're all getting gray hair. No, not his hair, his skin. Well, you know why? Why? He drinks his own urine. And that was an actual conversation they had that Hudson witnessed. And he told me. He said,
Really?
He said he drinks his own urine. So from that point on, anytime, excuse me, I have to rid myself of some urine. So that's been our joke. But it was those little magic things that, the time that he pulled that Ringo pulled out George's guitar, and when he played on Ed Sullivan, handed it to me, goes, check this out. It's like, oh my God. It had a pick in the string still,
Wow.
with an own sign. It was gorgeous. The pick alone, I would have grabbed and run out the door if I knew how to drive on the wrong side of the road. And so no, I didn't have the beats, and a lot of real critical things were 3 a.m. when I woke up going, what's going to happen when I did what could happen? And those were a lot of writing next to my bed going in the morning, do this, do that, do this.
The book begins, and you've mentioned this already today, the book begins with a great premise that Mark David Chapman and John Lennon never do meet on December 8th, 1980. Without giving too much away, let me rephrase that, depending on how much you want to give away, tell us the basic storyline of the book.
The basic storyline is a twist of fate makes John and his assassin never meet. So John is alive into the late 90s. Linda McCartney passes away, and Paul is so distraught that his daughters start to worry about his mental health. And they suggest, how about a benefit concert? You could put on a big concert like Bangladesh, give all the money to breast cancer research. And one of the daughters says, we don't need 100 different musicians. Maybe it's time just to get the right 4 musicians together. So that means Paul has to pick up the phone and see if the guys would be interested. And I've been in enough bands to know what that would be like. If I had to be in a band try to put a band back together that had broken up 20 years before, it would have been a tough phone call. But the rest of the book is, where do they even meet to talk about this? Because 4 Beatles in the same room together, and it's the world would go nuts. If they're going to play, where are they going to do it? Where is a venue important enough for a Beatle reunion? And what songs are they going to play? Are they going to play My Sweet Lord? Well, if they play My Sweet Lord, you might not have time to do She Loves You. What do you do? Solo stuff? Do you do Beatles stuff? Who remembers the songs? When's the last time they even played guitars? Are their calluses on their fingers still there? And it's just every step of the way. And along the way, you got people that would like nothing more than to get the scoop on this and spoil it for everybody. So you got somebody sneaking around trying to find, trying to be the one that throws the monkey wrench in. And the other person that might throw the monkey wrench is the head monkey, is Yoko, because she wasn't real conducive to a good working environment the first time. And now whose side is she going to be on? John's side, the Beatles side, her side? All the way to the inevitable, is the concert going to happen? And if it does happen, what does that sound like? What does that feel like? What does it feel like to the people out in the audience? What does it feel like to the people looking out the windows, listening to the music? And that's the book in a nutshell.
There are so many Beatle goodies tucked inside that story. For example, you knew that Lennon had a favorite cafe in New York called La Fortuna, and you know that David Geffen landed Double Fantasy because he was smart enough to approach Yoko before John, and you knew that Spector had fired a gun in one of Lennon's recording sessions. That tells me you are not just a Beatles fan, you are a big Beatles fan, and I see John Lennon over your shoulder there on the wall of your room. So you're a big Beatle fan.
I always joke with my friends that if I could make a living out of either Seinfeld trivia or Beatle trivia, I would be a very wealthy man. But you can't unless you do something with it like this. It's in our, I'm sure it's you too, it's in our DNA. And it's the little things like those little things that when we hear them, we store them up because it makes us feel a little bit like we're on a little bit more of the inside than just anybody else. And I loved doing that. I loved every opportunity to put in a little Easter egg or something that, that I heard. I'd love nothing more than somebody to go, well, that wouldn't have happened. And I go, no, it did happen. Well, how do you know? Well, because the guy that did it told me,
Right.
That makes it a lot of fun.
Because John lived in your story, there are some interesting decisions you had to make. For example, you say that Double Fantasy was a modest hit.
Yeah. I mean, without his death, that's just another album. Yeah, and it helped the arc of the story, because if John was firing on all cylinders, he would be less inclined to reach out for the rope that Paul was throwing him. But in the book, he's starting to get a little nervous. He likes walking around and being John Lennon. And the longer it goes before there's a reason for people to go, oh, look, it's John Lennon, the less he likes it. And I just feel that way. If you ever could listen to that record and take away the emotional impact of knowing what was happening when the record came out and just listen to it as a record, you'd go, yeah, it's one of his better ones, but it's no Plastic Ono Band.
You also, in your story, you say that both John and Paul were knighted. That's an interesting decision you make because Lennon was so anti-establishment. I wonder if he would, in real life, have accepted a knighthood. It's interesting. Like Keith Richards wouldn't, right?
I remember that we wrote a song on one of Ringo's albums, I think Ringo Rama maybe, called Elizabeth Reigns. And it's about the royal family. And he was just going on and on about not being much of a fan, and the whole time we were, it's like it was a struggle because I don't want to say that. I don't, no, okay. And he was very just not a big fan.
Of
And
royalty.
yet,
Yeah.
and yet when the time came, he recognized it for the honor it was and what it meant to his family. And he dressed in the top hat and the tails, and he showed up, and he got knighted. And it's a freedom. I could have had him done. I could have had him do anything, but I had him take it.
Yeah.
Also the competition. If Paul was getting it, he'd want it.
Right. And speaking of that, in your story, John and Paul decide to write a new song for the big concert, which is an interesting decision you've made. The first time they've been written together, or since Abbey Road, I would imagine, in the storyline. And Harrison's not happy about that in your story.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. When his wife says, "Well, did you want to write it?" No. Oh, those bastards. How dare they not make you write it, make you do something you don't want to do. But yeah, it's for me, what I found interesting in the foursome getting back together is there's no way it could be the same dynamic that it used to be.
Right.
Ringo can't be his one song, and George can't be the token little brother. And I found that interesting. So yeah, when the time came, I just found it interesting that they would have never even considered asking him to do it.
Right. He just wanted to be asked, really.
Pretty much. He just wanted to be asked to be on equal footing after all these years.
The antagonist in this story is probably the reporter. There's a reporter sniffing around, as you mentioned earlier. But Yoko plays a surprising role, and you hinted at this too, and it depends on how much you want to give away, Gary. But Yoko plays a big role in this entire story, which is so interesting to me. You don't have to give it away, but it's an interesting choice.
Yeah, I think it would be the obvious thing for everybody when they decide whether or not they're going to do this. The first thing that would cross Yoko's mind would be, and where do I stand? Where are you gonna mic my conga drum? And that's going to be a conflict right there when John goes home and has to say it isn't going to happen, or tell the guys that, it's a famous story that he was asked to do Bangladesh, and George was adamant that it's you, not you and Yoko. And John said, no Yoko, no me. And so he wasn't at Bangladesh. And, if it was that, then why wouldn't it be this? Okay, Yoko and I will come to the first rehearsal. No, just you. No Yoko, no me. So that set up so much of a fun dynamic and of will they, won't they, that I had to do it.
I'm not going to give it away, but she has such an interesting influence on the outcome of this story, which is great. And let me ask you this too, Gary. There's such a great surprise in the epilogue, which I will not give away because readers have to read it. But that great surprise in the epilogue, did you have that in your mind before you even put pen to paper, or was that part of the evolution?
It was not only part of the evolution, but the whole book was written and ready to go when I bolted up in the middle of the night and went, oh, wait a minute. And I came downstairs and wrote the epilogue, put it in, moved the end 3 pages farther down, and went, now it's done.
Wow.
Yep.
That's one of those moments that just jolts you out of a chair kind of a moment. I think that was one of the best moments in the book. Interesting to hear that it came to you so late in the process.
I wasn't really looking for something. I didn't feel that there was anything missing. I thought I had a really good ending. And, I've had that happen with songwriting too. I've had lines and songs that people come up and go, oh my God, where did you come up with that line? And I'm going, when I wrote that line down, I looked at it and went, where the hell did that come from? And that's just what happens when you're lucky enough to have the antenna go up at just the right time.
Do you know if Ringo's read the book?
I know he has the book. I know he talked. I was with Greg Bissonette, the other day, and she said, I asked Ringo if he read Gary's book. And Ringo said, no, I've got it. I haven't read it. Have you read it? I said, yeah, man, it's great. You really ought to read it. And Ringo just kind of went, I don't know if you have to edit podcasts for swear words.
No.
But when I told Ringo that I was writing this, because I wanted to clear it with him.
Oh, so he knew. Okay.
Yeah. Way back at the beginning of the pandemic, I said, this is what I've started, but I don't want it to mess with us. So, because I don't have to do this. I have a day job. So he said, Gary, long ago, we lost the right to tell people what they can and can't write about us. And I certainly would never tell you what you can or can't do with your art. So you write the book. I don't want to read the book. I'm just going to wait till it comes out and I'm going to shit all over it.
There you
Which
go.
is perfect.
Perfect. In the story, John and Paul, as I mentioned earlier, write a song, a special song for this reunion. And you have written the song with the same title. And tell us about the recording of that song.
Right. At the end of the book, there's a QR code where you can get the song. And the song is called Peace and Love. And I wrote it to be as Beatley as I could make it. And it actually has Ringo playing the drums. So it's that doesn't make it a Beatles song, but it's kind of fun to listen to it because, he's a very distinctive drummer. And it just kind of closed the circle for the book.
Yeah, it's such a great thing at the end of the book to discover that. Where can people get the book?
Well, obviously it's on Amazon and also audiobook. I read the audiobook. I put a disclaimer at the beginning saying, look, we all know what they sound like. I'm a guy from Connecticut. I'm not going to do fake Beatle accents. I'm not going to, oh, thanks for coming. I'm just going to, so all four Beatles are going to sound like a guy from Connecticut. I'm sorry. And that was the only way I could do it. But it's on Amazon and in my website, GaryBurr.com.
Can people get signed copies from your website?
Absolutely. Just follow the prompts and a signed copy is winging your way.
Okay, I'm going to take you up on that myself, as a matter of fact. Tell me just two last questions. I always ask our guests this question. The Rolling Stones came out about the same time, roughly, as the Beatles, the British Invasion. They've lasted. They still tour. They have a deep song catalog like the Beatles. Mick and Keith are characters like John and Paul were, but not nearly the intense fan interest in the Stones as there is in the Beatles. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. You think maybe it's because they didn't break up? Is it just the familiarity of it? I always make the observation that I could go a month and not hear anybody mention the Stones or Led Zeppelin or Linda Ronstadt or see a T-shirt of the Stones or Linda Ron. But not one day goes by where I don't see somebody wearing a Beatle T-shirt, hear it playing on in the grocery store, hear it on the radio. Not a day goes by that something Beatles doesn't hit me. And they're the only band. I can go a month and never hear the Pope mentioned.
True.
But you can't go a day and not hear the Beatles or about the Beatles.
There's so much going on in the Beatle world right now, too, Gary. There's the new film Beatles 64 is debuting this Friday on Disney+. We interviewed director David Tedeschi about it, and I've seen it. It's fantastic. Produced by Martin Scorsese. There's a Brian Epstein biopic in the works. There's new Beatle solo box sets coming out. Still such like an ongoing intense fascination with this band all these years later.
I think it also has to do with, in a really dark period in American history, they were the light. The Stones weren't. The Stones were, fight your way out of the streets. But the Beatles were appealing always to our better angels. And I don't think we ever don't owe them for that. And I think that might be a reason why when you think of the Stones, you think of rock and roll, you think of aggression, you think of a beat, you think of dancing. When you think of the Beatles, you think of peace and love. Who else?
So very true. By the way, this Beatles film that debuts this Friday is all about how they were a light in the darkness, Gary. A writer in that, just as a side note, there's the interview with a writer, Joe Queenan, I think, and he has this great line. He says, I don't think parents ever got over the assassination of JFK, but kids did. And I thought that was such a great line because he was talking about the joy that the Beatles brought in that darkness of grieving in that. It was only a couple of months. Like JFK died in November. They arrived in February. It's just a couple of months, right?
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. It's kind of a shame. We did have them, to lift us out of the gloom, and the parents didn't. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, me too. So what's up next for Gary Burr? What are you working on? What's going on?
I'm actually writing turning the book into a screenplay.
Ah, excellent.
Because there's always room for another Beatles movie.
Yes.
And that's a whole new craft to learn. I've actually written a second book, and I'm on about the third draft of that. Got a song on Kenny Chesney's new album that I'm really, really proud of, that I wrote with Mike Reed, guy who wrote I Can't Make You Love Me for Bonnie Raitt. And been busy traveling, and pretty much off between now and the end of the year. It's pretty much just sitting at the desk and typing when I feel like it. And, next year will be actually me and Mark Hudson and our friend Mark Morando have a Crosby, Stills and Nash tribute band. And we travel all over the country playing Crosby, Stills and Nash, Hudson and I and the other Mark Morando.
The Laurel Canyon Band?
Laurel Canyon Band. So that's a lot of fun. We do that, 2 or 3 times a month. We get together and, play Sweet Judy Blue Eyes. And it's really fun because, it's a lot of different tunings on the guitars and a lot of playing guitars not the way I'm used to, with a lot less fingers, but critical places to put them, So that's a lot of fun. And, just trying to stay busy into the cocktail hours of my life.
Yeah. That was my interview with Gary Burr, and a big thank you goes out to Gary. You can find his book and audiobook on Amazon and on Gary's website, garyburr.com, and that's spelled B-U-R-R, and he'll happily sign copies for you there. By the way, he even includes an imaginary Beatles reunion set list on the last page of the book. And thanks to Gary for the permission to play Peace and Love in this podcast. Keep your eye out for Gary Burr. He performs in various cities throughout the year. And keep your eye open for a possible film version of Reunion, a Rock and Roll Fairy Tale, coming to a screen, hopefully, near you one day. I'm Terry O'Reilly.